let's talk creatures, specifically a skeleton and the Scarecrow. Now, we looked at another video, which I'll link above, about how to age these things, like aging this skull and this pumpkin here. But let's look at the actual structures, these creatures and things, what makes them tick and what makes them so creepy looking. So today, we'll look at that. We'll look at how I built it, some of the things that I learned along the way, and some tips to share with you. Let's check it out.
Here's the Giantic Skeleton from Amazon. It runs about $130, and I tried to disassemble it as much as I could and paint it black. It's like an organic black. I also started to lay out some of the latex, very similar into the skull making video, in these like sheets to prepare it. And you can see, look, it disassembles a little bit, but I still have to do a couple of things to get it to where I want it to be. Because I want it to have this like sinister look, I have to chop off this like pole that goes through the whole entire skeleton. It's meant for like, you know, doctors' offices. And I also want to cut out some of this threaded metal pieces to embed where the arms are. So here we go. I'm gonna saw this off. They're sawed off and they're ready to go. You don't need to go this crazy. I just wanted something I could reuse every year. I cut the spine. There it is. It's because I want to use some great stuff, black foam. Yes, they do make that, courtesy of Decimated Designs. They had showed that there's some black foam that you could get, so it's already pre-painted for haunters, to position this so that it's a little bit creepier. Right now, it's just like a skeleton that you would find in some sort of doctor's office, and now I want to make it a little bit creepier. Another thing to point out is I took off the screws. This is where the arm is going to go, and I put these, I guess, what are they called? They're called, I guess, screw inserts. So I use this Allen wrench to tighten it in there, and now I have a threaded place to screw in, you guessed it, some photo mounting equipment. I just kind of stripped this one down. This is the thinnest one I could find. This is where we cut that piece of that steel, and I used another threaded part. So think of this screwing in here. I'll show you a little better if I can get it in. And then using this to control the arm. So now I can position the arm wherever I want and make it more creepy. So that just doesn't hang there. And then when it comes time to take this off and store it, if I can get it off here, now I can take off the arm. Just pretend that there's an arm here, and I can store these separately. So not only can I position them which way I want, but now I can take the arms off and store them. So a little cool thing that I kind of figured out there. This is the whole reason why I cut up the spinal cord and like where the head met, is so that I can position it so it looks a little bit more organic and a little bit more creepy. And what I'm gonna do here is I built up some blocks, some wood, just spare wood parts and blocks and things like that to just achieve this kind of angle. And then I'll put some of this black foam up there around all these things to start to solidify it. And then it'll stay in place, hopefully. The reason why I have this tarp here is that most of the time, that kind of foam won't stick to this tarp, but it'll stick to everything else. So I've built it up at the angle that I want, and I'll foam it, and hopefully it'll stay at this angle. So there we go, just like a really kind of nice organic angle. I'll talk more about the eyeballs in a little bit. Good way to test the angles and see if it looks creepy is to start to light it. So I just have some blue lights on here to see if it looks pretty creepy, and I think I'm pretty happy with that angle. Okay, it's time to foam. I have some backup textures here. I'm gonna try this. I don't know if it's gonna look good, but I'm gonna try to press some of these things into the black foam when I spray it over into his neck, down in the hips, around the neck and shoulder area. And I have some water just in case. This starts to like inhibit it from growing, is what I found if you spray a little water on some great stuff. Let's see what we can do. All right, so I'm taking the great stuff and I'm starting to start on the bottom. I've raised up the skull with some pieces of wood, and I've put like just tarp underneath everything so that the great stuff doesn't stick to anything. And now I'm adding some burlap and then putting more great stuff on top of the burlap to kind of encase it in there. And then as it's gonna dry, I'm gonna start to drag it with popsicle sticks. So I learned a couple of things here. Here's it drying. I might add a little bit more in the back once this dries just to get some extra support. Things that turned out well, definitely the burlap. Things that didn't turn out well, the tissue paper. Just maybe if you want that kind of weird look, but that doesn't look too creepy to me. So another thing that happens here that I've done before, but this really worked out, is when this starts to cure, the great stuff, you can take the tip and start to pull it. I don't know if you can see that, but you can pull it down and see, and it starts to create some really cool effects here. And then I just stuck more burlap in there and I pulled it over it. I think you saw it in the time lapse where some of the times I coated it a little bit and other times I kind of kept it a little exposed. But that part, when it starts to cure and you can kind of pull it, really turned out pretty well. Definitely unexpected and works out pretty well. There you have it. So here's an update from the progress of the skeleton creature. This is what happened. We had those like photo, I would say like anchors that you have for cameras and tripods. It turns out that even if you don't have 15 pounds, that if you have stuff that's weighted down at a further distance than where it actually connects, it weighs it down. So it wasn't staying. It didn't stay in place and it wasn't able to handle all of this. Even though it was just chicken wire and some latex here, I had to switch to just zip ties. This for me is gonna be easy. I'll be able to snip them and reattach whenever I want. The other part here is these particular areas. I wanted to beef up. When I put on this, the cloak, it just looked bony because he's a skeleton, but I needed some beef around his arms. So what we're using is chicken wire with some foam zip tied, and I'm not even attaching this. I just have it so that you can almost like overlap and connect when you need to. And then when you need to get to this, when you need to move the armature or take this off or reattach it, you just take them off. Look at, see, you take them right off. And then when you're ready, you put it back on, if I can get it here one-handed, and then you can clip it in per se. So that's the latest and greatest here. For me, I think it's gonna work pretty well. So let's go and see what we could do to get this guy corpseified. Let's work on the hands. So I wanted to extend these hands just to give it a little bit more of a creepy look. So I've got this wire here. It's just bare copper wire. Looks like it's 25 feet at 8 AWG. I got some, like electrical zip ties, small and large, and I'm kind of wrapping around the wire, kind of plugging it in here, stretching it, bending it, and then zipping it. And I'll later dip it in latex. I might put some twine around it just to make it a little bit more organic so it doesn't look like wire on top of a skeleton hand. So let's see what we could do. Now that all the zip ties are accounted for, I'm starting to roll everything up with twine, specifically this like home and garden twine, and just to make it a little bit more organic. And then I'm putting some layers of super glue just so the twine holds in place. We got the copper wire, the zip ties, and the twine, and I just put some hot glue here just to keep everything in place, and snipped a little bit of the loose bits right here. Kept a couple because I think it's going to be really cool when we put the latex on it. So I have the RD407. This is the black latex, some of what you'll see in the mask. And so let's see. I'm going to dip them in here and see if it gives like a really kind of cool organic skin texture. Let's check it out. And here is the first coat of latex. It didn't really quite fit into the container, so I had to dip part of it and then paint it on with like a chip brush. But I really like the way it's coming out, so we'll see how it dries. I'm just hanging it from a piece of rope and just letting it dry while it's kind of hanging, so there'll be no marks or it won't get stuck to anything. See what it looks like when it dries. Let's get into the skeleton. I'm sorry I skipped a couple of steps. This
just became something that I worked on, and you need to like put on music and just do. So let me break it down for you. The last time we showed it, it was just like we had some foam that we'd put up here. We had super glued his mouth open, and we'd started to add some of these things. So I went back in here with barge glue, with some cobwebs, and really started to create some of these fine areas right here. So you can see like this is cobwebs over in here, and then barge glue. So it was a mixture between the two. And because I had a black base coat, I started to then fill it in with some of the browns, some of the lighter colors, some washes, and started to really create this kind of like decrepit looking creature, you know. So still continued it up in here. Some things, these are really great. They were really hard to get, but they were really great. And this really didn't need it, so this is just more of a paint, because this is really going to be completely just closed off with that Jedi, with the Jedi cloak, as I'm calling it. You did see I did embed some LED eyes. So before I sealed this off, I had the LED eyes. They come out the back here, and there's the little cord, very similar to the pumpkin guy. It's just one of the audio jack cords that you can just basically like solder into one of the LED eyes, or the LED lights from Lighthouse LEDs, if I could say that correctly. And this is so much easier because you can get just a nice female end and then a male end of this audio jack cord that's like a 1 amp plug. So this is just it in a nutshell. I did mention these two, so I still kept these here. Maybe one day I'll do them, but for the sake of this, I wanted this arm to be up, as you can see. So what I ended up doing, I showed it in the other video, but I didn't explain it, was I embedded some of that same wire that I used for the Scarecrow. It's thick enough so that you can bend it and it'll stay, but thin enough so it's not really that much of a weight. So this helps keep this in place. This adds the bulk, which is just like a loose weave chicken wire with some foam. You can get some foam padding at Joann's or other craft stores. Zip tied it together, and this just comes off if I need to. You saw the arms here too, painted in the same way as I did with this, except it's just latex with that weave. But this was just like, it ended up being good. So I could just zip tie this. It was easy enough for me to do this on a ladder. And I would use this, but just even the weight of just this wire and this chicken wire, and this was actually the biggest one here, it doesn't weigh a lot, but it still didn't work. So you'll learn, you know, you figure it out. So hopefully that will inspire some of you to add some of these things here if you want to. But my main thing was, again, with the pumpkin too, I want to store this. I don't want to have this giant creature just there. So now I can take the arms off, I can take the legs off, and now I just have like one piece and then a bunch of other things that I could store in a box. So the other thing that I want to just point out is that this, you can see it a little bit here, but his head went down a little bit. With the weight of the rain, we had the cloak on and it was in the wind for a little bit. The foam was good, and I would say if you have a cloak on it, if it's gonna be out in the weather, you're gonna see some of it like kind of like, because of the pressure of everything, just lean forward slightly or sink down. So if you want to make sure that it's super sturdy and super there, I would say reinforce it with wood. That's the only thing that I would say here that wasn't exactly what I wanted to be, because like I had it in a specific set. I put this like all in this area, you saw it, and I wanted to make sure that it looked exactly perfect, and it just moved a little bit. So that was the only thing I would change, is probably reinforce it with some wood moving forward. So there you have it. That's the breakdown of the core part of the skeleton creature. There we go. Let's check out some other things.
All right, so I know it doesn't look like much, but this is the cloak for the skeleton. I use the same technique, which I'll link above, to age and weather this cloak. It's actually a Jedi cloak, I think so. And I got it like extra large to make it really just seem ominous. And we sewed some Velcro. Let's see if I can get this open here one-handed. You get the picture though. Some Velcro to just, I pinned it up initially to see where it laid and where it was like fit well. And there was even some side Velcro, it's in the back over here, to help just kind of bunch it up where it needs to be, but then let it flow on like the arms where it needs to be loose. And I also just literally cut holes, I think you can see that, where the carabiners and the line will be out to hang him from the tree. So that's really, it's very low tech Jedi Jedi cloak, aged and weathered, and then carabiners to make him floating. So there you go. And here are the carabiners. They're just something you can get on Amazon. I made sure that they were super tight and had a little bit of a locking mechanism. I don't know if you can see that. We also got 0.8 millimeter, there we go, if it can focus, kite rope. I found that this was going to be the smallest rope besides fishing line, but rope that could withstand a great deal of force. So I didn't need to be huge, but I want it to be black and out of the way and super, super thin. So carabiners, kite rope, hooked onto him to make him float. It's time to check out all the components for the Scarecrow or pumpkin guy, whatever you want to call him. Let's focus. You saw a little bit about where this was. This is just foam, same foam that I use for the skeleton. It's this black, the expandable foam, and it's a chicken wire mesh. Here, I'll show you. It's the tight weave chicken wire on the back here. I made like a little frame out of wood, used some washers. This helps hook in the back, so you can see there's already zip ties there to hook things in. So I left this exposed, which is good. Let's jump to this footage that shows a little bit of like how it was made. So we have wood on the top, we've got the PVC here, and I'm gonna attach the hips to the PVC. We've got some wood on the back with washers, and then we have like a wooden dowel in between. And that's where I'm gonna stick that wooden dowel for the pumpkin head and the neck. So everything's secure here, but it's lightweight and still works well. This is all just that foam, and when it was starting to cure, I started to drag it to make these kind of resembled ribs, and you can see that there's some really great things here you can do with some popsicle sticks. I shoved in some of the burlap while it was still drying to give it that kind of cool scarecrow look. And then his torso just kind of goes into the pants. It's like really nothing at all. There's a little beam right here so that I could hug some of the wire that's underneath to kind of hang his legs from. And that's really about it. I try to make this as simple as possible so that I could break it down really easily. It was super light, it could hang off of things and not have to weigh stuff down. So next up here is literally, this is his neck. This is what goes into the pumpkin head. I just foamed this piece here as a stopper, and it slides down the PVC pole right here. So again, really easy to assemble, nothing, no screws required, especially if I'm on a ladder. Next up here is his arms. So same type of that expandable foam, except now I'm just kind of bringing it along PVC pipes. Look at there they are, PVC pipes, and I put some wire underneath. This is like really nice thick gauge wire, forgot the gauge of it, to help loop around and just zip tie to, you guessed it, the base. I put some coarse rope, I just dyed the rope, I made sure it was really gnarly, and then I painted it, made sure it looked a little bit more worn, and then I dragged like a rasp on some of these things. Right here you can really see, so it kind of gives it that weird wood, stone kind of creature-esque texture here. And you can see I did a little bit on here as well. And then finally we have, well, not finally, but we have some of the clothes. I just took an old shirt, did the same technique. I can link it again, of dyeing and aging clothes. So just to kind of give a resemblance of clothes, I have a little piece of the neck that I would put over here, mainly to disguise some of this stuff and to tie in his head. And then some of the bits here, this is just, it's like, they're like branches that are posable. They have wire embedded in them. You can just get them on Amazon. I just shoved a bunch in his legs and his arms just to kind of add to this really cool kind of like viney, scarecrowy thing that I wanted to create. You could see his legs here have that's just it without any sort of paint. I just wanted to add it. So I added a little bit of girth by just putting the expandable foam on PVC. There you go, you guessed it. It's literally just PVC with the wire embedded so that it hangs, and then you can loop him right on, where is it? There we go. So, okay, I added some chicken wire here, but added this and I'll just loop it right underneath. I'll let it hang right on this, right over here. And finally, this was just a funkin that I dyed, I aged. I added some of the contact cement on here to make it a little bit grimy, and then I painted again, some washes.
This is that sculpture. It's the foam that a lot of like people use for armor and cosplays. I forgot what it was called. I'll call it out here. I just made it into a hat, into a top hat. That's literally just measured it because there was no top hat that would fit him. His his noggin's pretty big. The last bit here is I made some LED lights from Lighthouse LEDs. You can kind of see them in there. They were green. They were like the 5 millimeters, zip tied them together, and then added like this kind of connection. So you can use any sort of power supply, like a 1 amp power supply with this. It's totally gonna cover it, and then you can easily disconnect it so it's not just like hanging around. So again, this stuff I wanted to look at. I could store this in a box if I wanted to, and I can assemble it, and I can assemble it on a ladder and not have to worry about doing stuff and screwing stuff together. That was what this is about. Light, but also creepy, and make sure that it can combine and store down to like a box. So there you go. There's the Scarecrow parts and a little bit about how I made them.
Now let's see those finished creatures. If you want to see more videos, you can check them out here or go on my YouTube page. And until next time, happy haunting.